Hello viewers and welcome to my second video documenting the restoration of my 1941 Gibson ES300. The biggest news is it has strings on, but let me run you through the things that I've done to get to this stage. The first thing was to feed the fretboard with lemon oil. I used both Dr. Stringfellow's and Dunlop's lemon oil, and the rosewood was so dry it soaked up the oil very quickly. After about 4 doses, I finally got to the stage where the oil would sit on the wood. The cracks in the wood and the gaps around the inlays have all shrunk and in many cases closed up completely. You can also see in these photos the case that came with the guitar. It's neither the original case nor in particularly good condition.
So one of the jobs that must be one of the first jobs I do is to repair this loose binding on the headstock. And if you look closely, you can see that it's loose all the way up to back here. If I don't repair this straight away, there's the risk of it getting worse, or even worse, the risk of it snapping. And when I inspect closely, I can see that it's also loose here. So I'm going to do that before I even go as far as taking the tuning heads off, because I don't want to risk damaging the original binding.
With thin superglue and low-tack tape, fixing the binding was pretty quick and easy. I'm glad I chose to do this first, as all the binding is original and intact and should now have a good chance to stay that way. Once I had fixed the binding on the headstock, I then removed the non-original tuners, and here you can see the imprints left behind from the original tuners underneath the imprints made by the newer tuners, and the extra holes that were drilled to mount those later tuners. So I cleaned up the back of the headstock and plugged all the screw holes. Yes, you'll notice that the G-string tuner does seem to have been mounted just a little higher up the headstock than the D-string. This does seem to be how it left the factory. So I've fitted a set of Wilkinson open back tuners, which are the closest thing I can find at short notice to what the guitar would have had originally. The screw holes lined up pretty close with the original tuner mounting holes, which of course are now plugged. I'll keep my eye out for a set that have the same footprint as the original ones, but these are a really good option for now. And as you'll notice, getting that G-string tuner to look right has been difficult considering that the hole was in the wrong place from the start.
So in closer inspection, it seems that this crack is perfectly stable, and this crack here also perfectly stable. I can't seem to move the wood either side by pushing. And when I looked really closely, what I discovered was that both of these cracks have been filled by a previous repairer with glue. So even though light is getting through, they are stable. Now I have added a splint to the back of the crack here at the top and another splint just under on this side as well. And this crack is actually supported by a rib on the inside. So at the moment, I'm actually perfectly happy with leaving these cracks now and just observe what happens when I string the guitar up. Hopefully there will be no movement.
A proper long-term fix for this crack will involve inserting a fine little piece of spruce into the crack. But for this stage of things, as I said, I've secured the crack from behind with a small piece of spruce with the grain going across the crack. Here's a photo of inside the guitar looking through the end pin hole, looking directly at the neck block. It seems that the number written on the underside of the top may be 1242, and then there is just a trace of possibly a fifth digit at the edge of the pickup cavity. If anyone out there knows anything about factory order numbers for 1940s Gibson, leave me a comment below. In this shot, we also see a good view of how the braces were cut for mounting the pickup.
The good news is the truss rod turns freely. So just exactly how much effect it has on the neck, I don't know yet. I'll wait till I've got some string tension and have a look.
With the strings at tension, there's a tiny bit of neck relief, so tiny that it's hard to see in this photo. I don't feel any need to adjust the truss rod yet, so I'm just leaving it for now.
I had a dig into my pile of spare parts and I found that I do actually have a old archtop bridge. Well, when I say old, new old stock lying around, so I'm going to use this for the first stage at least of the restoration of this guitar. The first stage being just getting the thing playable to fully assess it. So it's not quite the right style for a vintage Gibson, but it'll do for the purposes of testing the guitar out. To make it fit, I'm going to have to sand the bottom. As you can see, it doesn't quite fit, doesn't match the arch, so I'm going to have to do the trick with the sandpaper and get it to fit properly. And of course it's a bit too tall, so I'll have to cut it down. But before I can smooth or match the bottom of the bridge to the top of the guitar, I'm going to actually have to smooth the top of the guitar. Here where the finish, the overspray, has sat underneath the foot or the feet of whatever bridge was on here. The finish has sort of crinkled up and been sort of crumped into this sort of raised, ridgy section. So I'm going to have to sand that down and smooth it off before I can actually think about trying to start fitting the bridge to the top. So that's one of the next jobs to do.
The first job of fitting the bridge was to make sure that it fits the top curve, the arch of the guitar. And to do this, I use the age-old method of taping some sandpaper to the top of the guitar and sanding the bottom of the bridge base plate until I get an even spread of sawdust across the whole base, indicating that it matches the arch. Here in this photo, I'm about halfway through the process. So here's how close it's fitting after that. I will keep my eye out for a period correct bridge, but this will suffice until then, while I'm still working out the long-term plan for this guitar. Now, one purely cosmetic thing that I've decided to do is clean all the overspray off the binding. Now, obviously, if the top gets refinished in the long term, this is not a great use of my time, but it's very satisfying to see the binding clean again, and it really brightens up the look of the whole guitar. I've fitted a modern reproduction tailpiece because that's all that's readily available. Again, I'll keep my eye out for a proper one. The ES300 style did have a slightly different diamond-shaped pressing on the crossbar, and what we have here is more reminiscent of an ES175. I've strung the guitar up and brought the string to enough tension to hold everything in place in this photo, and as you can see, it's all a little bit off center, a little towards the treble side. I'll investigate why that is and get back to you in a future video. I hope it's not because the previous neck reset was sort of off center. So I think I am going to have to install sound posts back in this guitar because, as you can see, there's that much flex in the top when I just push on the bridge. Here we can see how much the top sinks with the strings tuned up to pitch. It's about 3 millimeters. That's about 1/8 of an inch for people using old maths. But I'm going to risk it and tune it up just long enough to play it for a bit. And that's really the whole point of this stage of the restoration, to evaluate the guitar. So here goes. I'll play a few little tunes for you so you can hear it acoustically. So here is the 1941 Gibson ES300. I've temporarily strung it up with some D'Addario half round, 11 to 48ths, just to see what it sounds like acoustically before I move ahead with any more decisions about the restoration. So at this point it doesn't have the sound posts that it had previously fitted by a previous owner or repairer. It's just as it is acoustically. I'll just put a bridge on it, tailpiece, some strings. Here we go. So I'll play some big band type chord thing first. Alright, I'll play a melody this time so we can hear what this guitar sounds like with single notes.
think I can ascertain from that it probably does need a bit of fret work. So now I'll play something that combines notes and chords so we can get a fuller perspective of the character of the guitar.
So that's what it sounds like acoustically. I'm mildly impressed with the volume and tone. It does need some work on playability. Now I guess the next job is to make some sound posts which should protect the top from flexing too much under pressure. The ES300 is an electric guitar after all, so look, I'll let you know that I have actually started conversations with a local pickup manufacturer to make a suitable pickup. I'll do an update in the future video to keep you posted about how that goes. But for now, thanks for listening.